Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Fandom Track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail Z Martin, and tonight we're talking about Grieving Our Heroes. There are shows ending. We've lost some very important fandom celebrities, and those things affect us much more than people outside our geek community may really understand. And talking with me tonight is Dr. Lynn Zubernis, and I'm going to let Lynn give her own bio and let you know who she is and why she's the person here talking to me about this.
Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here. I'm Dr. Lynn Zubernis. I'm a clinical psychologist and a university professor. So that is what I do for my professional life. But another part of my professional life is I do a lot of research on fandom, and especially with a view to why fandom is healthy and helpful and a really positive thing for many of us. So I've written many books on fandom, many of them focused around the television show Supernatural, including my last two books, There'll Be Peace When You Are Done and Family Don't End with Blood. I wrote with the cast and the fans of Supernatural. So both fans and cast members wrote their own chapters about why the show has been special. And Supernatural is one of those shows that Gail mentioned that is about to go off the air. So this is a topic that I both deal with professionally. I teach graduate courses on grief and loss. I'm a psychologist, but also I'm dealing with it as a fan because I'm a huge fan of Supernatural. So I am personally feeling the dread and the impending loss right now.
Well, thank you, Lynn. And yes, this is why Lynn's perfect to be, having this conversation, because one of the things I really love about all your books is the affirmation of fandom as a healthy and validating community. We so often have gotten portrayed in non-fandom venues as being those weird kids over in the corner, or, oh my gosh, they play D&D, they'll probably kill somebody. And especially for female fans, there's even more of an edge to it. And while we may have won the geek culture war when it comes to box office blockbuster movies, in real life, sometimes we still run into some of that. And I think people outside of fandom don't always understand how you can get so emotionally invested in a show, in a fandom. Now, these are the same people who may get majorly depressed when their team doesn't win the Super Bowl. Yeah. That they understand.
Yeah.
Just fandom. So let's talk a little bit about that connection to a fandom before we get into the specifics of some of the ones that we're going to be losing and grieving.
Yeah, I mean, it's that connection that makes the loss of a fandom or a fan community or an object of fandom such a big deal. If we weren't so connected, if we didn't take it so seriously, and if it wasn't fulfilling a need for us that was so important, then it would be kind of a frivolous loss. For someone who is not really fanish about something, a television show that's been on the air for 15 years ends, and maybe you say, oh, too bad, I'll have to find something different to do with my Thursday night. But when you're really fanish about something and that show and those fictional characters have become really important to you, it is a significant loss. I mean, I may have said this on here before, but there's research that shows that when you spend time with kind of your beloved, most favorite fictional characters or in those beloved fictional worlds, the same thing happens in our brains as when we're sitting down with all our friends and family for, an intimate dinner. Like, we get those same brain chemicals going. And right now, maybe more than ever, when we are cut off from a lot of those friends and family, so we're not having, we're not planning Thanksgiving dinner with 20 people. That's what we usually have in my family. we're not doing that. People might get together in, you know, a few people, the people that you usually see, but we're cut off from a lot of those experiences. So now, perhaps more than ever, being able to visit those beloved fictional worlds and be with those fictional characters that feel very real to us and inspire us, that's really important. So the thought of losing that at a time when we don't even have all of the quote unquote real life stuff to fall back on is really challenging. It's a big loss. And then that's just the show or the book itself. There's also the loss of the community that is built up around something that people are fanish about. Also hugely important, more than ever right now, when we, you know, we can't have a block party with 50 of our neighbors, but we can go online, and in those online communities we have people who know us probably honestly better than those 50 neighbors that live on our block do. So the thought of that community also being impacted by some kind of loss, either, you know, by an actor that people were fanish about passing away, or a television show going off the air, or a book series ending, or even the kind of loss that comes from finding out something about, you know, a beloved author or showrunner or something that maybe you can't get behind, and that changes your feeling about the thing you're fanish about. So potential for a lot of loss because there's so much powerful good stuff happening there.
Well, yes, and I think that, you know, you've really touched on something there with, for someone who is deep into the fandom, there is the show, and then there are all the concentric circles of the community around it. So that includes the conventions, but it also includes the people live tweeting new episodes, or doing online chats about new episodes, or doing episode rewatches, and all the online fandom communities, and then the sites like Your Fangasm and the Winchester Family Business that, you know, if you just saw an episode and you loved it and you hated it, but you can't wait to read the review and see what somebody else, did they like that or did they not like that? And so there's always something new coming out. And we will still have those places, but we will not have brand new fodder anymore.
Yeah.
We can retread this for a long time, but we won't have the brand new stuff. And so that changes things too.
Yeah, I mean, I feel very spoiled by having been in the supernatural fandom for 15 years, because I am used to being able to go on one of the websites, or just open up Twitter or Tumblr or Instagram or TikTok or anything, and there is brand new content. There are people posting photos of the actors, or you know, spoilers about upcoming episodes, and then there's just a discussion that takes off from that. There's literally hundreds and thousands of comments. So if you want to, you can immerse yourself in that community whenever you have time during the day, and it feels very validating. It feels like, okay, I'm immersed in thousands of people who are all talking about this thing that I want to talk about. It's certainly, you know, as you say, it's not going to go away, but we know from experience that what happens when the source material is no longer providing content, the fandom stays around, but it's not an experience of, if you go on Twitter, there will be 1,000 people talking about the new picture of Jared Padalecki, or, you know, whatever it is. So it does change the way that community interacts.
And I think the other piece that comes with this is that fandom at this point also provides a very important escapism component, because the world is kind of, sometimes literally, on fire, and fires, floods, you know, pandemics, all kinds of stuff, all hitting at the same time. And
brain-eating amoebas.
Yeah, who had that on their bingo card?
I did not.
Murder wasps, you know, every day there's something else. And I think that a lot of people give escapism kind of a bad rap, but I think it's a very healthy thing to be able to say, time out. I need to go in my blanket fort, and I need to, you know, hide for a little while so I can come back out and cope. I mean, do I have that wrong, or blanket fort's unhealthy?
Absolutely not. And no, and the more stress people are under, the more they need those kind of coping strategies. I mean, there's nothing more human than fantasy. We are one of those creatures that is capable of fantasy, and fantasy is a wonderful, healthy escape. Like almost every healthy thing, it can go too far in a direction. You know, if you're so lost in your fantasy that you are not being successful in your real life relationships or your job or your education or whatever it is, then okay, now it's kicking you in the butt. But for most of us, you know, we really benefit from giving our minds a break. I need to get off doom scrolling sometimes and go read a favorite piece of fan fiction or watch an episode of Supernatural or, you know, Dancing with the Stars, something that is I can immerse myself in a different way that's not going to cause me real life stress. And yeah, no, that's a good thing.
No, I agree. I mean, I think escapism is a wonderful thing, and it gives us a healthy outlet, especially in a year when maybe we can't take that vacation that we always took that was our de-stressor. Maybe we can't go to some of the places that were always our favorite thing to do on a weekend to get away from it all. So now we're looking for other ways to cope, and the escapism of books. And I know when my mother was dying, I read 200 cozy mysteries that year.
Yeah.
Now, cozy mysteries all pretty much have the same plot. You know, somebody dies, somebody figures out who did it, and you usually have figured it out ahead of them 2/3 of the way through the book. And that's what makes it so calming, because it's not gonna throw you a big surprise, and the bad guy gets what, you know, it all ends up good at the end. And I think that's what we're kind of looking for in a lot of our escapism.
Yeah, I mean, there is something feels very in control about that, feels very familiar. Familiarity is very secure feeling for humans. It comes from our earliest time. We are drawn to that familiarity. So, I mean, there's a reason why many times when people go to read fanfic, instead of reading something new, they will reread their favorite piece. Or I'm sure people do that with your books. You know, like there's a favorite story with their favorite characters, and instead of finding a new author or a new book series, they go back to the one that's familiar. I know people have said they do that with Family Don't End with Blood and There'll Be Peace When You Are Done, that they read it again and again and again because there are certain chapters, especially, you know, some of the really powerful ones written by the actors, which are very reassuring because they talk about how the actors who are, you know, the people we fan have been through a lot of really hard times and have come out on the other side. And just like you were saying, essentially they have a happy ending. So reading those again and again and again, somebody wrote me an email the other day and said they've read Jared Padalecki's chapter in Family Don't End with Blood, I think something like 150 times. Now, they probably have just about every paragraph memorized at this point, but the familiarity becomes part of the point. Let me revisit this. I know what's going to happen. I know it's going to have a happy ending. I know he went through hell, but I know he came out of it. I'm going to read those words again. It's, you know, it's like when little kids want to hear Good Night Moon read to them every single night, or hear the same lullaby sung to them. That familiarity feels good.
Yeah, and we question that when it comes to, you know, hearing our favorite songs. That's often a go-to for a lot of people, is that's their, you know, okay, this is my stress playlist, and I'm just gonna, you know, play those songs that make me want to dance. And it's very much the same when it comes to watching a show again. I had to laugh. There was a thing going around on Facebook on, you know, how many of these shows have you watched more than 10 episodes of? And I don't watch a whole lot of TV, so I had only watched 4 of the shows, but I asked if it counted that I had watched all 14 seasons of Supernatural multiple times.
I think that should count at least for 2 or 3. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. Considering most shows don't wrap with 327 episodes.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
So let's talk a little more about all of these messy feelings about Supernatural coming to an end. You know, in a way, we got to put it off.
Yeah.
It was sort of Schrodinger's series for about 6 It was alive. We knew it was ending, but it was still alive because
Yes.
they didn't get to finish. You know, they didn't get to shoot the last 2 episodes. They didn't get to finish the production on the 5 before that. So this was all supposed to end in May. And now it's ending in November, and it will start, you know, back up with new episodes in October. How do we process this? How do we feel about this? And I haven't been in it since the day, you know, day one, and I'm still having some real feels about the whole thing. Big feels.
Yeah. No, I'm still on the fence about whether the weird delay made it easier in some way or made it harder in some way. The answer might be both. The answer is often both. But I think that when we were leading up to the end that we expected to happen in May, there was a lot of momentum and everybody knew it was coming and we were all preparing for it. We'd been preparing for it for a year. We had over a year to know that it was coming. For the cast particularly, I think they had that momentum building up to it. And while it would have been difficult, we also all sort of had in place the way we were going to deal with the end. So, you know, I was going to be in Lawrence, Kansas with some of my oldest friends in the fandom watching the last episode together. So people had planned ways to make that loss that we knew was coming easier, being surrounded by whoever was going to be most validating for us. Now, because we're in a pandemic, most people will be watching the end by themselves, or perhaps, you know, with whoever else happens to live with them in the house, but might not be a fan. So I think people are maybe more anxious about the end at this point because all their carefully made plans for how they would get through this are not there. So I mean, you know, I'm gonna be on Zoom with other fans who feel the same way that I do, but that's not the same as being. We were all gonna spend, you know, 4 days together walking around Lawrence, where the Winchesters were from, and processing our feelings, and then we were gonna spend the next day all probably sitting and having a drink and crying together and leaning on each other, and that's not gonna happen. So it's been a real weird up and down. Oh, it's ending. No, it's not ending. And then I think everybody went into denial for a while because it's like, oh, haha, it didn't end. Maybe it's never ending. And now all over again, it's like, oh crap, no, it really is ending. And this time it is actually going to end. So it's been a real roller coaster, I think.
Well, and I think the thing that goes along with that is that we also lost our conventions.
Yeah.
Because they were all wisely canceled, but still, when the conventions are happening as the show is unfolding in real time, we're getting the actors on stage, and they may only be a couple of weeks ahead of the episode we just watched.
Yeah.
So it's not hard for them to speak to the emotion and the things that happened during that episode because it was just 2 weeks ago for them, even though we've just seen it. And that would have been one of the things. You and I were going to be in Chicago together in June at the convention, and it would have been a month after it ended. They would have been fresh off of it themselves. We all would have still been fresh in the feeling. And then in November, we were going to be in Charlotte together at the convention. And again, it would have been a week after it ended. Everybody still would have been in all the feels. By the time we get back to having them live again, Jared will be on to doing Walker, Jensen will be on to doing The Boys. It's not that they won't still care, but it won't have that immediacy that we can't get back. And I think that's one of the things I'm grieving.
Yeah.
Is that we will have something wonderful, but we can't get that.
Yeah. We will never have some of those things that we were going to have that would have made this ending easier for us. I think, you know, we're a very unique fandom. We are also very spoiled by 13 years of pretty consistent access to the main cast of the show, so that if you had a question about something that was happening on the show or with a character, you could ask. Maybe not you personally, but someone could ask. So we were not ever just watching the canon unfold. We were also in a very reciprocal relationship with the actors And we were always privy to, not everything, obviously, but we were always privy to a lot of their feelings about what was happening in the show. So I think, I was also counting on those conventions being really therapeutic, being able to say, okay, the show has ended, but in 3 weeks, I'll be able to ask Jensen, how did it feel in that last scene as Dean? Or what was Jared feeling, et cetera. And now we're not going to have that either. So that is a loss on top of a loss for this fandom. And I think the other part of it is, it was really important to me. I was really looking forward to the last convention where Jared, Jensen, and Misha would be Sam, Dean, and Cass. Like, for me, having known them for a long time, but really caring, I care about the people, obviously. I've written books with them. They're wonderful people. But I really care about those actual fictional characters. That's what I fell in love with, is the characters. So for me, it was a really significant loss when they did the last day of filming. I had a really, really strong emotional reaction because I knew that, in a sense, Sam, Dean, and Cass no longer existed. Jared, Jensen, and Misha were no longer Sam, Dean, and Cass. Like you say, will they always love them? Will they always feel like a part of them is them? Sure, but they're actors, and they will go on to invest themselves and immerse themselves in a different role, or in Misha's case, maybe in a real life role in politics or something. I don't know, but they won't be being those characters. So that was a separate loss for me. I felt like I lost those characters that I love because they don't exist in the world anymore.
And interesting that Jensen and Jared both talked about that in their podcast that they did with Michael Rosenblum during quarantine. Of course, they went up when they were finally able to go back up to Vancouver to finish the filming. They had to be in a 14-day quarantine before they were even allowed out of their apartments as part of the safety of working up in Canada. So I thought it was just really interesting, when Jensen shared a very teary video of saying, always before the scripts always said to be continued, and this one said the end, and he was really feeling it.
Oh yeah, there were tears in his eyes.
And he shared the video of them breaking down the Men of Letters bunker.
We both did the same thing. We both made the same gesture at the same time. Oh.
And Jared posted about, they've really been very generous about sharing their feelings about this end.
Yeah.
But I agree, we didn't get to share it with them in the same way. It's all they could give us, but it's not the same.
Yeah, no, it isn't. I'm really grateful for it. I think I've written an article every week kind of wrapping up everything that has happened during the week. And I keep saying again and again, I'm so grateful for all the content that they're all sharing. Like, every bit of it eases the loss a little bit and reassures us that there is some connection still there. And I think that's felt very good to people. But it's not the same as being in the same room with them and hearing them and seeing them. And, we still don't have that.
Now, Jensen did say in one of his videos that, and I think it was the Michael Rosenblum one, that he, having the time off really actually sort of helped him refocus on doing these last 2 episodes, kind of gave him a little more perspective. And instead of having that momentum you talked about earlier, it kind of let it sink in. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's funny because I had this conversation with Jensen throughout the entire year leading up to when the finale would, like, every time I would see him, I would say, "Are you feeling it yet? Has it sunk in yet?" And every time he'd be like, "Nope, staying in denial, staying in denial." He was really good at staying in denial. And then right before the shutdown happened, I had a conversation with him, and he for the first time said, "Oh yeah, it's here, it's sinking in." So they were starting to get very emotional in March when they were heading into those last 2 episodes. But they were also really exhausted. Their seasons are just boom, 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 boom. So I do think for them, they kind of got a second wind and they were able to go into it sort of very fresh and very committed. And I think that probably helped them. We all deal with loss and grief and stress better when we're well rested and we're healthy and we're not exhausted. So I think it helped them in that sense to have had that time off. And they did disconnect from the characters a little bit. And even though it was temporary, I think that probably reassured them that, okay, I can do it. I can do it. I've done it for these last 5 months. Now I can't wait to go back in there and put those boots on again for the last time. But I know I can kind of survive this. So I think there was some of that was helpful. I was very worried for a while that they wouldn't be able to film with most of the crew that they've had, because I know how important it's not just the actors with the other actors. That crew is their family. So if they had to shoot it somewhere else or with different crew, like that really would have been a loss for them. So I know they're really grateful, and I'm grateful that they were able to really almost all of them to come back and do it together. So I'm glad they didn't have that loss on top of loss.
I did feel really bad for them that they weren't able to have a traditional wrap party, because so much of the crew has been there the whole time, and if not the whole time, then for a very long period. They've had so much stability in the people behind the camera that we don't see.
Yeah.
And so to not be able to have that wrap party, which is basically the creative equivalent of a funeral.
Yeah, it's their grieving ritual. Just, I mean, we got cheated out of our grieving rituals. They got cheated out of their grieving rituals too.
And I think that putting it in that way also really validates our feelings that maybe it's hard to put words around on. I know I feel really bad about this, but I'm not exactly sure why, when you realize it's a grieving ritual. It's letting go of something that's important to us.
Yeah, and it's a real loss. I mean, I think the hardest thing is when there's a loss of something, you know, when Chadwick Boseman died, you know, when someone who, he's a real person, but he portrayed a character who was so important to so many people in a film that just, it was such an inspiration to so many people. And in real life, he was also such an inspiration to so many people. So when someone like that dies, it hits people really, really hard. But there are always people who don't understand, who say, well, oh, did you ever meet him? Well, no, I never met him. Well, then how can you be grieving him? Like, you didn't even know him. So what, you saw him on screen? But I did feel like I was grieving him, because that film was so impactful, and what I had read about him as a person and what I had seen him do, and then to know that he had done all that while he had been so ill only added to sort of how inspirational he was. So is that a real loss? Yeah, it's a real loss. It's not the same as losing, you know, your partner or your parent or your child or something, but it's a real legitimate loss. Same with a television show that's been your go-to place to feel better and to get through hard times and to be a source of inspiration. Not having those fictional characters exist to inspire you anymore, that's a real loss, and it needs to be grieved.
Yeah, I mean, and with Chadwick Boseman, you know, he broke ground. He represented something so much bigger than just Black Panther, just himself. And so many people saw themselves in that heroic cast, represented on the big screen in a major motion picture for the first time. Yeah. And that was so powerful. So there's the man, there's the character, then there's the representation. And when you lose him, you lose all of that all at once. And that's, you know, that's even harder.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen it. I can't remember which late night talk show it was on, but there was a thing where they had fans come and they thought they were talking to like a cardboard image of Chadwick Boseman, well, T'Challa. And then they were like talking and saying, this is what you did for me. You got me through this, the hardest time of my life. And this is how you inspired me. And this is what I learned from Black Panther and da-da-da-da. And then Chadwick himself like popped out. and to watch the react. You have to watch. It's on. I'm sure it's on YouTube somewhere. I don't know which late night talk show it was, but so incredibly moving, like the stories that these people told. And I mean, really, that's the same thing with the stories that the fans wrote in Family Dynamics Blood, and They'll Be Peace When You Are Done. It's these heartfelt stories about how this fictional show and these fictional characters inspired people in real life. That's real. That's important.
Well, and I know in my life, like I mentioned, reading all those cozy mysteries the year my mom died, I have immersed myself in a book during hard times or immersed myself in a series. And as an author, and I know you've gotten these same kind of letters on There'll Be Peace When You Are Done and Family Don't End with Blood, when somebody sends you an email or social media message and says, I was having a really hard time with this and your book helped me get through it, whether it's a tour in the Army or sitting vigil by somebody's bedside or just going through a rough patch in life, and your characters or your book gave them a safe place to escape and help them get through it, that's tangible. That's real. And I think that's something that many of us have taken with Supernatural. And of course, Supernatural, in part because of Jared's very well publicized and his candor about his own issues with depression, we've got a fandom that is very mindful of depression and anxiety and suicidal ideation and mental health issues. And how much of a safe space Supernatural in its fandom has been for that. So I think that adds to some of the concern right now. Am I still going to have that safe space? The show is ending. Am I still going to have my safe harbor? And I think we will. And I think we'll continue to be there for each other. But yeah, can you say something about that kind of fear?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a legitimate fear. It's just like anything. If somebody tells you, hey, I know this has been your primary coping strategy and it's gotten you through a lot of hard times, but I'm gonna take it away now. And you'll just have to go find something. I mean, as a psychologist, like that's a rule. Like you never take somebody's coping strategy away until you have something to replace it with, because it's profoundly terrifying to think that we won't have our primary coping strategy. One of the reasons that we put together, especially There'll Be Peace When You Are Done, because we put that one together knowing that the show was ending, and we wanted it to be like literally a tangible kind of transition object. We know that when people are grieving, it really helps to have something to hang on to, something physical, something touchable, something that you can go back to again and again, that connects you to whatever it was that you love. This is sort of one of the basic things that helps people get past grief. Not get past it, because you're always grieving, you always miss the thing, but sort of incorporate that into your life going forward. So we wanted There'll Be Peace When You Are Done literally to be something beautiful and moving and full of inspiring words from the people who you loved in the show and your fellow fans that you could hang on to. And I have, fans are already sort of doing the anticipatory grieving of the show ending. And I've been so happy to have so many people write to me or tweet me or whatever and say, this is helping me so much. I like keep it right by my bedstand. I can pick it up. I can hold it. I can look at the pictures. I can read the words in it. It's helping me feel like I can get through this. So I'm really, really happy that it is serving that purpose.
And we're talking before we started the actual panel, I love the articles that you've been posting on the Fangasm site about the normalcy of grieving a show and giving people permission to grieve the show and validating their feelings, because as we've said, people outside fandom, people who aren't fanish, don't always get it. And that's important coming from you as a fan, but also from you as a professional.
And I've purposely in this series of articles that I'm doing not really writing sort of as a professor or as a psychologist. I really am writing mostly as a fan, because the most validating thing is to know that other people are feeling the same thing as you. So they've been sort of more personal articles than I usually write. And I've been very candid about, this is how I'm feeling. Like, I'm really hurting. I'm really scared. I was really sad about this. I cried when this happened because this is how I was feeling. And that's not everybody's way of coping. So I've gotten some tweets and some comments and some emails saying, you're already doing so much grieving and I don't want to hear that. I just want to enjoy this final run. And that is so valid if that's the way you do it. But we all grieve in different ways. For me, I have to express the loss that I'm already feeling. I have to express the sadness that I'm already feeling, along with, we were talking about this before we started, that is in coordination with a great deal of anticipation and excitement. I will enjoy the last episodes. I absolutely unequivocally will, because I'm so grateful to have them, but I can't sort of compartmentalize my knowledge that the loss is coming. I have to be able to feel those feelings.
You give people some, I don't know, tips for grieving in a healthy way, or at least accepting their feelings. What are some coping strategies or tips that you'd share?
I mean, you hit on one of them just in your question. Accepting your own feelings is really important. Don't let anybody tell you you're being silly, you're being ridiculous, you shouldn't feel blah, 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 blah. We all feel differently. Your feelings are valid feelings. You're allowed to feel them. You're allowed to feel them about a television show or an actor who's died or a book series that has ended or an author that's disappointed you or whatever it is. You are allowed to feel those feelings and you're allowed to express them. We all differ in how much we need to express feelings, but most of us have some need to express our feelings to someone. So finding kind of that safe space, which fandom often is for many of us, to be able to share those feelings. And if you're in a fan community, I think one of the other things that we can do for each other is not to police each other or shame each other for our feelings. So don't tell someone, oh, you're being ridiculous, you shouldn't feel that way. Or don't tell someone, that's not a healthy way to feel, you should be feeling X, Y, or Z. Grief is very idiosyncratic. It's very individual. We all deal with it in a different way. We all have our own grief and loss histories and our traumas that are going to be pulled into a new loss. So not everybody's going to feel the same way. So try to sort of be gentle with each other too, because we are the best people to validate these feelings for each other. So I'm hoping, it doesn't always happen, but I'm hoping that for the most part, the Supernatural fandom will pull together as a community to really help validate each other. And then the other thing I was just going to say, and the other thing that you can do is understand that grieving doesn't mean, like, accepting a loss doesn't mean devaluing that the thing ever meant anything to you. It doesn't mean saying, all right, well, that ended, now I have to go on to something else and never care about Supernatural or whatever it is ever again. You can hang on to it forever. That's what hopefully the books will do. Or maybe it's, Dean's amulet that you bought, or maybe it's a plaid shirt that you wear. Whatever it is, those things are healthy too. Those tangible things that help us remember the show that we can always hang on to so we can always cherish it. That's also helpful.
Those are terrific tips. And, the other thing that I have to remind myself daily is that given the fact that this is an extremely stressful time, it's not normal. It's nobody's normal. It isn't even normal in living memory. Sometimes the oddest things take on, it seems, disproportionate importance. Like, and I don't mean disproportionate like it's not important, just like, under normal circumstances, I wouldn't have gotten quite that upset about it.
Mm-hmm.
But now it looms large because my hair's on fire all the time.
Yeah.
The world's on fire all the time. And I think that can play into some of this also, where I have to keep giving myself permission to feel what I feel.
Yeah.
Whether I think it's rational or proportional or not, because it's a reaction to being in such a weird world right now. And sometimes things aren't proportional, and that's okay.
Yeah, no, that is. And just understanding that and being gentle with yourself, I think is really important. I do think, this would have been hard for me no matter when it happened. This show has meant a lot to me for a really long time. So I certainly would have been upset no matter what. But I do think we don't have much reserve right now. We've been under incredible stress just as a group, as humans for, 6 months, 7 months. It'll be 12 months soon. I mean, we don't have a lot of reserve left. So dealing with the other things, the other stressors right now is even harder. So I think this loss is going to be a big one. I think it's going to be really significant for a lot of people.
But the important thing to remember is that we have each other. We have the canon of 327 episodes. We have the vast canon of fan fiction, and we have your books. We have each other.
Mm-hmm.
So we have such a body of support and such a wonderful family of support that, like Cass was telling Jack, someday they're going to be gone, but you were lucky to have them when they were here.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where we all are right now.
I think I know that every time I write an article, I talk about my overwhelming gratitude at the same time as I talk about my sense of impending loss, because they can coexist. I mean, I think that's another thing that's helpful for us to remember. You can have feelings that seem really antithetical and really conflicting. Humans have conflicting feelings all the time. Don't let it throw you. Don't think, well, I can't possibly, if I'm feeling sad, then that means I'm not grateful. No, it doesn't. You can hold both of those emotions simultaneously. Don't let anybody tell that you can't. And I am basically a hopeful person. So I do think that there will come a time again. I look forward to like the first supernatural convention, whether you can go to it or not, because we all experience it online as well. So whether you're there in person or whether you're watching it online from all over the world, that will feel so good and so healing just to have all of us in the same place again. And I think we'll do a lot of processing when that finally happens with the actors and with our fellow fans. So it's delayed and that sucks, but I do think it's going to happen.
Well, Lynn, thank you so much for being here with me tonight. And if you haven't read Family Don't End with Blood and There'll Be Peace When You Are Done, what are you waiting for? Go get it. They're terrific books. And I'm not saying that just because I have a chapter in There'll Be Peace. They are really fantastic books, and they'll help you get through this. But thank you again so much for being with me tonight.
You are welcome.
And of course, there will be more Supernatural here on Continual. So we will see you online.